Do not get this author confused with Chekhov on Star Trek. Not the same person. Anton Chekhov was a writer, Russian writer, back in the mid-1800s. And I never read much of this person, but the story captivated my attention. And I think as you start to unpack it, you're going to go, well, this sounds remarkably similar to something else. Let's see if you catch it. The story goes that there was a rich banker. Like, got money, made good deals, got some money. He's at a party, and he's engages in a conversation with two younger people. And he asks them the question, poses them the question. If you are in prison and it's a capital crime, would you prefer death or life in prison? One young man chimes up immediately. The executioner's blow is for 1 second and it's done. The other man says, no, any life is better than no life at all. Now, this upset the banker, so he decides he's going to make a bet with this young man, who is then 25 years old. He said, I will wager you the amount of 2 million rubles. I have no idea how much 2 million rubles would be, so thank you, Google. I can go in and search all of this, pull back and look at how much 2 million rubles were sometime around the time that this was written, and projected forward in today's money, somewhere in the neighborhood of $62 million. Sizable bet. I'll wager you 2 million rubles that you will not be able to stay in solitary confinement for 5 years. The young man said, make it 15. So sure enough, it's going to be 15 years. Now, this banker had a rather large piece of property, and he had a building over on the corner of his property, which he then allows this young man to stay in. He'll be fed 3 meals a day through a little door. If you've ever seen movies of solitary confinement, people that just think the plate goes through the door. Looks similar to that. There will be guards who will be watching him. He will not know when they're there. He will not be able to see them. They will catch glimpses of him through this period of time. And so he's then placed in his place. Now, he has several options. He can, by writing a letter and sending it out, that he can't see anybody when he gives the letter. He can ask for certain kinds of foods, anything he wants to read, and musical instruments if he chooses. So he has these 3 things. So the time begins, year 1. Every day, almost at any hour, they could hear the piano being played. He orders in light novels, just general read stuff. After a year, the piano falls silent, is not heard anymore. He then begins to ask for the classics. So he's reading all of these. His knowledge over the course of that gets to the point where about the 5th year or so, he then asks for deeper books on philosophies and world thinking. Occasionally, the guards would just kind of peek a glimpse at him. And by the time he's in his 9th or 10th year, he sits at his table. Between the 5 and 6, he goes for languages and he masters 6 languages during this time. I mean, if you don't have anything else to do, so there you go. All right. Somewhere around the 10th year or so, he asks for a copy of the New Testament. And they would catch glimpses of him with his head over the Bible, reading all manner of day. Whenever they checked him, that's what he was doing. That went on for a year. After that year, he then started asking for books on theology and very deep philosophy. And this continued all the way up to within a week or so of him getting out. Now, it's 15 years. He's 40. He's going to walk out with 2 million rubles and be set, right? The banker has fallen on hard times. His gung-ho attitude from 15 years earlier has not quite carried him through this length of time. He suffered a lot of losses, and $2 million rupees is going to pretty much break him. So he hatches a plan. I'm going to steal into his room while he's asleep, kill him, and blame one of the guards. He goes in. The man's asleep on the table. He approaches him and notices there's a letter on the table that is addressed to him. He opens it up, and the letter, the gist of it is, I have been to the tops of mountains, although I've never been there. I've met all kinds of people, although I've never met any of them. I know things about the world. I know all of this stuff. I detest every bit of it. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not interested in the things of this world at all. I thought that at one time this 2 million rupees would be my ticket to paradise. I don't want any of it. So I've decided that 5 hours before the end of the day, noon, on the last day of my 15 years, I will walk out of here and escape, and I will break the contract. The man doesn't carry out his death sentence upon this young man. But Chekhov writes, he kissed him on the cheek and left and cried all night long. For he had grabbed for what this man could have had all his life, and now realized that this man had more wisdom, had more understanding through this 15 years of being by himself than anything he had learned in the world. It was all detestable to him, and he didn't want any of it. Sometime around 7 o'clock in the morning, 5 hours before the due time, one of the guards saw him leave the building and escape through the gate and go away. Does it sound like, familiarly like, maybe a little bit like one book in the Scriptures? Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. The man who had more money and more opportunity than anybody else on the planet could build whatever he wanted, be with anybody he wanted, build anything he wanted, have anything he wanted and had. And at the end he says, there are but two things that man should do: fear God and walk in his ways. This is Solomon, the book of Ecclesiastes. What did that young man, now I realize it's just a story, right? Not true. But Solomon's a real person. That chapter in the book is real. After all of the things that he did, none of this to him matters. Yet for us, particularly in this day and time, that's totally opposite of anything that we would think about. People are always thinking about, well, how am I going to make more money? When am I going to buy a bigger house? When am I going to get a better car? When am I going to do this? What about my relationships? What? We build like this, thinking that this is the way, this is the key to happiness. Right? Am I wrong? This is how the world thinks. And our perspective gets so focused on this. Do we miss God? Are we missing Him? These two spiritual disciplines, and I want to thank Elizabeth for taking a little time to make a few extra slides here. So I'm going to jump into a couple of these that she came into. And they're on the bulletin, but she made a very valid point this morning. She said, if somebody doesn't get the bulletin, they're not really following what's going on here and probably can't keep up with you as fast as you talk. So hopefully, this will help them a little bit. There are certain of the blessings that we have, or the gifts that we have, that require other people to be around. Okay? If I think about, and I gave this to the elders, and at some point, if you'd like to ask them a little bit more about this, there's a wheel that divides up your life into 5 major categories. And 4 of these categories have to do with other people. Your family life, your church life, your community life, and your work. But there's this one category, the personal category, which is like you and God. You and that situation that's going on with you, whatever that is. Pardon me. I'm good. Gifts that require other people are family and fellowship and evangelism. I mean, it's hard to evangelize somebody if you're not talking to anybody, right? Evangelizing the mirror doesn't really work. You got to speak to somebody about him. Ministries of any kind involve interacting with other people and many of the other facets of church life. We get into those things and we pour into those things, and you can make a really quick mistake by thinking that that kind of ministry, that kind of outreach is your relationship with God, and that's wrong. I've seen people that list stuff. They go, God is first, my wife is second. Has anybody seen this? You raise your hand if you have. God is first, my wife is second. My children are third, my job is fourth, and my ministry is fifth. Well, I got into seminary thinking that I'm here because God called me here, right? So I'm going to be here, and ministries are what He called me to do. And what happened was, in that line and that order of stuff, the ministries I'm trying to get into now supplant Him. Because they're up here with Him, because I figure if I'm doing those for God, hey, God, am I doing a good job over here? Am I doing this all right? And all of a sudden, my relationship with Him starts to go in the tank. I have to tell you this, that during seminary, it was one of the driest spiritual times in my life. Yet I was 250 pages a night reading, a night. And some of you studied like that, and you know what I'm talking about. Your brain is like mush in the morning because you spent half the night reading to get ready for the next class you have. 250 words, 250 pages a night. Not light reading, by the way. And trying to do this ministry and this outreach and this thing and that thing, trying to develop the techniques necessary to serve God. And I feel like this is like a desert. So that didn't work. And when I came across this thing that I showed the elders, and maybe one of them would share it with you if you were to ask about it, it's not a list of God first. It's that God's at the center of everything that you do. And anything that you do from any of these 5 areas are sending Him worship. Whatever's in that center circle is where my worship goes. And the power of that goes out from that center into these ministries. Personal, church, community, work. What did I leave out? Family, that's it. That's a bad one to leave out. Thank you. You were listening. I appreciate that. So these 5 areas. So I pose them the question. I'd pose it to you. If you picked up this wheel, this circle, and set it down on the most important thing in your life, that's where your worship goes, and that's where your power comes from. So if that's your cell phone, that only works as long as the lithium battery's got energy in it, right? If that's a relationship, a human relationship, that's not going to last long. If that's money, it can go away. If it's whatever it is, you put that in there. But if God's at the center, big G God, big G God's in the center of that thing, you got all the power you need, and all the praise and worship needs to go there. Does this make sense to you? Okay, well, if I'm going to do this, although these group ministries, I love fellowshipping with people. I'm not saying y'all are bad. But if I'm not spending my time with the Lord, this thing I'm trying to do is of my own strength, and I haven't got any of that. I don't come with my heart set toward Him. I come with my own attitude, and my attitude's sometimes not too good. I'll be straight. There are these 2, silence and solitude. They require that we temporarily withdraw to develop these 2 spiritual disciplines. They are important. They are essential. Now, we have certain things that we would think are this, but let's go through these 2 definitions really quickly, and then we can chat about that a little bit. Silence is the voluntary and temporary abstention from speaking so that certain spiritual goals may be sought. I'm going to be quiet. This Ecclesiastes passage. It's time to speak. It's time to be silent. Now, most people hear this, probably the Ecclesiastes 3 passage, at a funeral. Everything, there's a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. And then they got people that say, the last thing I want at my funeral is for you to say that. Okay, I'm good with that. I'm good with it. I really am. Because that's not what's going on. Because this person, if they're a believer, that has stepped away from this world, now is in eternity with heaven, with Jesus forever in heaven. And I don't know about you, that's where I want to be. That's like a single amen in the house. I want to be there, okay? So my mind needs to be on that, not on this. If I'm telling God that he doesn't have time set, well, we talked about that when we talked some weeks back about that. God created two unique things for us. One, time, and two, work. And when we usually get sideways with whatever's going on in our life, we're not managing these two things well. Yet we're the stewards of those two things. And he gives us the freedom to do right or mess up. And he'll fix us if we let him. Okay? All right, good. So for me, this idea of silence is probably one of the hardest things in the world because I talk to myself incessantly. There are many jobs I could probably do, but being a spy is probably not going to work because everybody would hear what I had to say when I was walking around. My wife says, more than one time during the day, she'll say, are you talking to me? No. They say it's a mark of intelligence. I'm not so sure. I know me pretty well. I'm not sure if that's a mark of intelligence or not. So, to be still, to be silent. Our enemy knows this really well because that, I believe, is one of his key areas to break us down. Noise, sound, stuff. We don't know how to handle that. You're 5 minutes without a sound, and there's something wrong. There's something really wrong. I make you this challenge. Now, if you're a computery, geeky kind of person, you have all these little backup battery systems in your house because they'll start making noises. As country people in the western part of the state, they'd start squalling as soon as you turn the switch off. You just go in the house one night when the sun's getting ready to go down, find the main switch in the power panel and turn it off. And if those things aren't plugged in, you're going to sit in a house with absolutely no sound. No fans. No noise. You know, these lights up here have a little bit of a sound to them because they're running through voltage controllers. They make noises. I lay awake at night, and I'm sure the power company sends bursts of signals through the lines for various operations, and I hear them on and off and on and on. And I'm there trying to figure out, is there a song at that speed, you know? You try to find the order in something. To sit absolutely still, totally quiet, silence. You know, here's an interesting thing. God's built you in a very unique way. Well, all of you is very unique, okay? But let's think about this right now. You know, there's a volume control inside your ear. And if we get really quiet here for about, a minute or so, that automatic volume control is going to turn up 100 times more than it normally is set at to increase your ability to hear. And that's why when you turn the alarm on at night, it doesn't seem so loud, but in the morning, it about causes you to jump right out of the bed. Same volume. Your ear's just gotten more sensitive. Well, ours normally run with that thing fully dampened down low because we've got so many noises around us. It would damage the ear. It's a fascinating system that God has built for us. But if ours is always cranked to maximum attenuation because of all the noise, something is radically wrong. We need silence. Is there a time that you have where things are absolutely silent, that you're awake enough to know it? I'm not talking about when you're sound asleep. Yeah, you should be silent. But is there a time when you can actually consciously say, I'm going to remove all sound and just be still? Now, while you're there, you can do the other part that Psalm 66 says, be still and know that I'm God. The second is solitude, to be by yourself. Well, I know some social people, bless their heart, they couldn't be by themselves for 5 minutes. I think that's what makes social media work so well. I think much to our hurt. When people are living their entire lives out of a box that sticks in their pocket, something is radically wrong. God did not make us for that. God made it so that we could look at each other and smile or get upset. Read body language. That's important. It's important for me to be able to look you in the eye and say something to you and get sort of some reaction. Am I getting through? A teacher trying to get to a student has to have that. If they all had shades over their faces, I might as well be speaking to a wall of cotton. I want to see that reaction. Because that tells me I'm getting through, this is making sense, or it's like deer in the headlight look. I got a whole room of people with a deer in the headlight look. Okay, I need to back up and hit it again. Approach it a different way. I know that I'm right because I've seen it work, and I've seen it work in other people's lives too. It's that communication when you walk into a room and there's 100 people, and the first thing you do is you're scanning around looking for a what? A familiar face. And as soon as you find that person, you instantly gravitate to them. Well, hey, how are you doing? Now, I might go talk to somebody else, but I've got a little security over here because I know at least somebody. But to imagine going off by yourself in solitude. We have examples of these through the scriptures, and I thought we'd start with Jesus first. Jesus was led away by the Spirit into the wilderness. This is Matthew 4, right after he's been baptized. And he's led by the Spirit out into the wilderness for 40 days when we talked about the fast. This was a supernatural fast to go this length of time. He is led out to a place where he's by himself. Now we know that the temptation's coming. And here is the Son of God going out by himself. Sounds like that might be a reasonable pattern to follow. Is this the only time he does it? No. It happens again in Matthew 14:23, and we were looking at that. Actually, it was one of our verses. Now, the verse right before it, he sends the disciples out in the boat and sends them out across the water. He's going to walk on water in a little bit. We're not going to talk about that passage, but that's where you are. And then he's the one that dismisses the crowd, not his disciples. They're already in a boat sailing away, and he's standing there getting everybody out of the way. And he waits till they're all gone, apparently. And then he goes up to the mountain to pray by himself through whatever part of the day is left, because it says it's evening, it's night, and he is there alone. Alone, still, in solitude. I don't figure he's looking at a rock or something. I figure he's speaking with the Father. We don't have a record of what that is. That solitude that he would have with the Father, I believe, is truly the solitude we need to have. Mark 1:35. He rose early in the morning to go to a desolate place. And there pray. He didn't go just to go to a desolate place. I've been camping in some desolate places. There's a spot in the far western mountains, I'm not sure if it got hit by the storm or not, that is considered, there's actually a website that you can go to. What is the most physically disconnected, electronically disconnected places in a state? And you can find it. And the fascinating thing is that the one for North Carolina is also the one they use for Tennessee because it's right near the border. So apparently when you get to this spot, there is zero, nothing. You are by yourself out in the woods, and I've seen images of it. It's like a patch in the woods. You sit down here, you are as alone, electronically speaking, in this world as you can be. Nobody can reach you. Cell phones, internet, nothing. Nothing is out there. This is a desolate, electronically desolate place. I'm not sure most of us can figure out what to do with that. That's what I think of when I think of desolate. Or desolate being up on top of a glacier when there isn't anybody around. I've seen some places that were pretty desolate. You don't have to go far out of this area to get there. Alaska, we left Anchorage. You go 15 miles outside of Anchorage. If you were blindfolded and they turned you loose, you have no clue where you are because it's Sitka spruce as far as you can see. It's absolutely beautiful. But you have no clue where you are. A desolate place to pray. Well, what are the ways that we can do this? And I'm going to try to go fast because I don't want to keep you here all day. But if one of these things strikes you, maybe pursue that. We go into silence and solitude to minimize distractions. Elijah needs to speak. God's calling him. So he goes to a mountain. And there he is by himself. That gets him away from everybody because right now he's not having a great time of things. Go back and read this section in 1 Kings 19 and you can dig that out a little bit more. Paul goes to Arabia after his conversion, and I found this to be an interesting one because here it is. This is the Jew's Jew, man. He's after the Christians hot and heavy. And when Jesus has his one-on-one with him, a real coming to Jesus meeting, and he is then lost his sight for 3 days, and now his sight is restored, he decides he's going to have a break. He needs to go someplace and rethink where he's been. And silence and solitude does that for him. Minimizing distractions. Again, our enemy has got us some really nice tools in place to keep us from being focused on what God is doing. He just keeps us busy. In fact, if you have not read the Screw Tape Letters, you probably ought to read that. This is a C.S. Lewis book where a lower demon is being taught by an upper demon how to confound and conflict and confuse humans. I got 3 C's out of that. That was pretty good. To express worship. Now, some people say it Habakkuk. I had a gentleman in seminary that said Habakkuk. But I'll go either way, okay? I know one thing. It's not something that most people write down every day, so trying to spell it is a little bit difficult. But in Habakkuk 2:20, the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silent. Now, it's not talking about a temple built like this. It's talking about in his creation. And in fact, there's a church not too many miles up the way that this is the sign in their worship center. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silent. And when I read that, I'm going, okay, I've come in here to worship, but I don't want to miss the fact that there needs to be some praising and stuff going on too. So I understand what they're doing when they say that God is in the place where you are now trying to go, to find that place where you can worship. To find that place where your focus is now on him, which means the only way to do that as far as humans go is that we need to separate ourselves from everything around us that would draw our attention away from it. It just is. We need to set our mind on things above, and that means we need to set our mind away from the things on this earth, regardless of what that is. To express faith. Psalm 62, 1 and 2. For God alone is my soul waits in silence. Now I know that what usually happens is something like this. We're in one of those 911 emergencies that God needs to do something, and we sort of start praying, and we feel like this is the pressing of the button on the emergency locator, and I'm expecting God to do something immediately. Especially with patience. Oh God, I need some patience. And I want it right now. There's a story of a lady that I may have shared with you a little bit. She decided she's very, very, very athletically fit. She had some 50 flights of steps that she would climb every day to work rather than taking the elevator with a 46-pound pack on her back. She was in great physical shape. She'd climbed several mountains, and she decided she would go north to the White Mountains in New Hampshire, to a place called Mount Washington, which is considered to have the world's wildest weather. Flat ground, 221 mile an hour wind on top of this mountain. People die on this mountain literally every month of the year, even in the middle of July, because weather can turn like that. You can go from 120-mile visibility, which is unheard of in most places, down to complete zero, freezing fog, which is an amazing thing to think about. Everything sticks together, including your clothes and your gear and your skin. Well, she went up there to travel light and fast with all of the equipment and technology necessary to save her should she get in trouble. But she made a couple fundamental mistakes and found herself on the top of the mountain with 100-mile-an-hour winds, and it was 20 below zero. She pressed the magic buttons, but it takes people, all volunteers, to get to her. By the time they do, too late. She's frozen, solid, on the side of the mountain when they find her. We want God to immediately step in and take care of us, yet in the waiting, we come to trust Him. If we're willing to wait on His timing, we have to be willing to wait. It may come really fast. And I know that you've prayed for certain things and boom, it happened pretty quick and you went, oh yeah, that's pretty good. I must have an inside passage to God. And then you pray and you pray and you pray and you pray. Does God hear me? Does God hear me? Wait. As Isaiah tells us, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall walk and not grow weary. They shall run and not faint. Isaiah 40:31. To seek the salvation of the Lord. Lamentations 3:25-28. Now, most people quote 23 and 24, but when you're reading in 25, it says, the Lord is good to those who wait for Him, to rest on Him. Jesus is here, His disciples are here, and they would ask Him certain questions. Lord, are we going to do that now? Is the kingdom coming right now? No, not right now. Lord, should we do this? No, let's not put any energy toward that. Can we do this now? Yes, now is the time. So in God's timing, and we've talked about this before, there's Chronos time, and then there's God's Kairos time. And what I want is Him to do it on my clock, and He says, no, I don't work by your clock. I'm outside of time. I'm beyond. It boggles my mind to think about that. The timeless God stepped into time to save me and you. I need to wait. Now I know that if you're a parent, you wait on certain times for your children to mature, and you pray and you pray and you pray and you pray, and you go, maybe this never happens. Maybe you don't see it. Then they come back when they're 30 years old and go, where'd you get all your intelligence? You suddenly got smart. What happened? No, you had it. You just weren't listening. Or you pray and you pray and you pray for that person that they would come to know Christ right up to the moment that you leave the earth, and they haven't come yet when you leave, and then God does it some other way. But you've been faithful to wait upon Him, to wait upon His answer. It is in His timing and by His might. To be physically and spiritually restored. Here Jesus speaks to His disciples. They are apparently worn out from whatever it is they're doing. And He says to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place. There's that word again, to a desolate place, and rest a while. Now, what do our normal vacations look like? We don't work at work, we work at play. You're trying to get a trip up to the beach, and the man of the house has it figured out to the split second. It's going to take this much gas to get down there. We're going to leave at this time because I can check into the hotel right here so I can be on the beach 14 seconds after I get there. Or something like that. I've got it all planned out. And whoa, anybody in the car that has to stop to go to the bathroom. Or if there's a flat tire, oh my. Or the GPS doesn't work. And I wind up somewhere up here or down there or whatever. It doesn't have very much at the beach. Happens a lot in the mountains. And then we work and we work and we work and we go 100 miles an hour. And it's like everybody says, well, your vacation, you really won't like it. It'll be what happens afterwards. Reflecting on that. Something is seriously wrong if this is supposed to be my chance to relax. But I don't vacate. I vacated my whatever I was doing, but I'm just as involved. Imagine going to a place where you don't do that. Going to a place where you can just kind of go and breathe and walk. You've heard me mention the name Jonathan Edwards, pastor. When he meets his wife-to-be, she is an early teenager. They're young. And he said, the thing that I so admire about her is that she just wanders through the woods and the glens, and she's perfectly at rest. And she said, she walks around and speaks to someone like there's somebody actually there. And this was the first thing that he noticed about her, that she was willing to come away from everybody else and walk. And he realized that it was her spirituality, that her relationship with God was being grown while she was there in a seemingly useless amount of time. One pastor said, sometimes you have to come apart to come together. You have to find those times when you have that quietness. Come apart physically. To regain spiritual perspective, Luke 1:20, and behold, you will be silent and unable to speak until. Most people should know what this is. John the Baptist's earthly father is now having a little bit of a problem with all the stuff that's supposed to happen. So the angel just tells him, you're not going to be able to speak until he's born. Now I can not imagine what went through his mind for all of those months waiting on John to be born, and he can't say anything. Wonder what he thought about. He actually went away to a desolate place, because how many of us would find it extremely difficult not to be able to enunciate a single word? I'm here in this place. I'm with you, but I can't say anything to you. You're speaking to me, but I can't respond to you in any way verbally. I put the name Billy Graham here. Let me just really run this extremely fast. It is Billy Graham's, he's early on in his ministry. He's getting ready to do a youth ministry thing in San Bernardino, California. There's a gentleman, his name is Cunningham, and he's like the evangelist at the period of time. But he falls in with a crowd of people that are beginning to question the authority of God's word. And this guy starts feeding books to Graham. And Graham is going, you're telling me the Bible is not God's inerrant word? He said, I've always put my faith in this. But, you're a very well-known person, and you're really pumping all this stuff into me. So Graham gets to this San Bernardino the night before the San Bernardino thing's going to happen. And he goes outside and he walks around just in the woods. God, how should I get out? What should I get out of this? Well, there are two things that come to mind. Two passages from the Old Testament. And the word of the Lord came, and thus saith the Lord. They occur 2,000 times in the Old Testament. And this kept running through Graham's mind. So he goes back to the cottage, grabs his Bible, walks outside, plunks his Bible down on a stump and says out loud, God, I don't understand everything, but I believe this is your word, and I'm going to stand on it. He starts this evangelistic big tent thing in California, if you can imagine that. And they're going through some weeks of it, and all of a sudden he goes one night there, and the press is just hanging all over the place. Cameras and movie cameras, and this is 1949. And he said, why are you all here? And they tell him, they say these words, you've been kissed by William Randolph Hearst. He said, what do you mean? I've been kissed by William Randolph Hearst. They show him a teletype that has 2 words on it. Puff Graham. William Randolph Hearst owned every major newspaper in the country. If you got a blessing from him, you were going to be front page. And Billy Graham had just gotten it. And Graham said, I never met the man, don't know much of anything about him. But I'm going, he said those things over that Bible, open Bible, on that stump. And God heard him. As one man said, Billy Graham took God at his word, and God took God at Billy's word. And if you hear the story of him, if you've never watched that hour-long biography of him, I've got it. We can run it. It's pretty awesome. The things that this man did. One life dedicated to do what God's called him to do. Pretty awesome stuff. Billy Graham regained the spiritual perspective. He began to look through God's word at everything around him and trusted God for it. And that changed everything. To seek the will of God, Jesus actually prays for the chosen 12 the night before he picks them. If Jesus would pray for decisions, should we? Or are we just sort of kicking the door open and saying, all right, God, I got my foot in. Now, if you'll just push it the rest of the way, we got this thing. Or do we stand here and go, Lord, if this is the door I'm supposed to go through, then please open it, because I don't want what's on the other side if you don't not sending me to it. I don't want it. I just don't want it. To learn to control our tongue. Last one. Samuel Clemens. Know who he is? Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a riverboat captain. He was a pilot. And if you were on the Mississippi River, you only piloted a certain portion of the river, because that old dark water, it flooded really fast. And so a major flood would come through. It would shift the entire riverbed. And if you didn't keep track of where it was, you'll run your ships aground. So they would have a captain for a particular section of the river. Well, you've got a guy up front, none of this all electronic depth finding stuff, LORAN, SHORAN, and radar, okay? It's like you ran a line down with a weight on it, and there were marks on that line. And when you had enough water underneath you, that was Mark Twain. That's where his name came from. And Mark Twain was quite the world traveler. He went all around places. He went to Kilauea in Hawaii to see an actual real volcano. And Kilauea is like the place to go, because it's not an explosive volcano, but you get to see it, really cool. And you get fairly close to something that's 2,000 degrees. But he went there. He did all these things. In fact, he would spend time with Nikola Tesla in his upper lab doing some of his experiments in the late 1800s. There are pictures of that. That he and Twain are together. So he was writing a statement, and he said it something like this. He said, it is better that a fool remain silent than to open his mouth and remove all doubt. Well, the Bible actually says it the exact opposite, but it says it, I believe, in a more positive way. It says, even a fool is counted wise if he keeps silent. To stay silent. I knew a man, he was a major influence in my life in my teenage years. He's about 6'4", so he's like the tallest person in the room. And you've heard me speak of Henry Reeves. Henry was a very quiet man. He knew the Lord, and he loved the Lord, and he could talk about the Lord all the time, but he didn't ram anything down your throat. And he'd be sitting in a meeting, quiet as could be, and after everybody, all of the hoopla and all the noise and everything would calm down in the room, after everybody else had had their say, someone would turn around and say, Henry, what do you think? And this man, who was towered over everybody else in the room, would stand up, and he would normally talk about like this, not very loud. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet in that room. Because this was like E.F. Hutton. Everybody wanted to know what E.F. Hutton said. Everybody wanted to know what Henry Reeves had to say. Because when it came out of his mouth, it was well thought out and made a whole lot of sense. Silence and solitude. Important things for us to have that in our day and time, we must guard ourselves to be able to find this time. We must carve out the time for it. When is that time for you? Might I suggest, what time of the day or evening are you the sharpest? Are you a morning person or an evening person? During that time, find those moments. Carve that time. When you decide you're going to go away someplace, when you go, keep your plans very loosely grabbed. Let God give you those quiet moments. We all need them to develop our spiritual disciplines and walk closer with Christ. Father, give us wisdom that we do these things well for you. Pray this in Jesus' name.